Hello, crypto world. Welcome to the Chart Historian. My name is Justin, and on this channel, I delve deep into crypto charts, exploring chart structures, fractals, and patterns. Wow, look at the Casper chart, folks. It's happening. So the decline is over. This is the beginning of the bull run. Let me show you why I believe this to be true. So if we jump back to the very beginning of the Casper chart, now I'm no longer on TradingView. Instead, I am on charts.cointrader.pro. This allows me to go back on a small time frame. This is on an hour candle. And the importance of going back to the beginning is that this has a pattern that today's chart is following. So what you see here is a repetitive structure that has played out 2 times on this chart. Let me explain. So it starts with a move up. Now this move up is actually a bull run structure. It's been repeated here and here. After this move up, it comes to a peak, it pulls back. It has this structure right here, what I call a topping structure. It's basically a wavy kind of structure that eventually breaks to the downside. Now, it doesn't always take place this high up. For instance, this time it took place at a lower price point than it did here. And then the third time it took place was way down here after a massive pullback from the peak over here. So it takes place after the pullback from the peak. Once it breaks to the downside, it comes to a capitulation point, and then it enters into a sideways range-bound time. This capitulation point is marked by a bounce. We see the same thing here. So it comes to a peak, pulls back, does that topping structure, breaks to the downside, and then has this capitulation right here that's marked by a bounce. This bounce was much larger than this bounce. For those of you who follow this channel, you already know that when a fractal repeats, the timing, height, and depth is always going to be unique. So it can allow for novelty in the way a fractal plays out. For instance, here it played out small, this bounce. Here it played out larger. However, it's still a bounce. It's the basic idea repeating. So after this capitulation point, it enters into the first fractal of the sideways range-bound time. This fractal moves up, moves back down, moves back up again, and then winds its way down to a point. We see the same thing over here. However, this time it moved up and pulled back in one candle. It then moves up again, pulls back, and kind of goes flat before entering the next fractal. Both these kind of go flat or angled down. The unique feature on this second fractal of the sideways range-bound time is this bull structure. So price moves up, drops, goes sideways, moves up again, creating this bull structure, goes flat, and then drops. Here it moved up, dropped, went sideways, moved up again, creating that bull structure, and then kind of went flat, angled down to a point. So the last fractal is this bounce that terminates the sideways range-bound time. We see it play out here on a larger scale. Notice here too how it drops below all this sideways range-bound time, whereas this time it didn't. So this green box is the beginning of the bull run structure. Here, of course, it played out on a much larger scale than here. If we zoomed into this little box, it would look something like this. So this is the first bull run structure. In it, it has 3 waves. Here's your first wave, here's your second wave, and here's your third wave. Your third wave brings it to a peak. This one dropped and then went flat before exiting out of this structure. The second time it played out, let's zoom in and take a look at it. So you have your first wave, and then you have your second wave, and then you have your third wave, which brings it to a peak. However, instead of dropping all the way down, which this first iteration did, it dropped all the way down into the first wave zone. This second one holds its ground before moving out of this structure. So, why are we talking about this? It is my belief that we have completed the bounce on today's chart, and we are now beginning to work on this structure right here, this first bull run structure. Let me show you why I believe that is the case. After this bull run, it declines. It has this topping structure, which we talked about over here and over here. It does the same waves, and then it breaks to the downside. Let's jump over to TradingView where we can see this next part of the chart a little clearer. So that topping structure is way up here. It played out on a very small time frame. However, once it begins to play out over here, it plays out on a much larger time frame. Okay, so here we are zoomed in, and this is the decline structure, and here's that bounce at the end that marks the capitulation point, as we see what took place here and the second time around over here. After this capitulation point, price moves up into the first range-bound structure. Here we have a real quick move up and then a pullback, and then it moves up again. Similar to what happened on this iteration, which is the second iteration of this structure, price moves up in one candle pretty much, moves down, moves back up, drops, and then goes flat. It drops and then goes flat. The second range-bound structure is the one where it moves up, drops, goes flat, and makes that bull structure. We see that here and here. We also see that here on today's chart. Price moves up, it drops, goes flat, moves back up again, and then declines down to a point, the same way that this one declined down to a point. And then that brings us to the bounce, where price moves up and then declines. The same way that this bounce did, price moved up and then declined. Or this one, price moves up and then declines. Now, this bounce has a lot in common with today's bounce, where today's bounce goes lower than this sideways range-bound time, just as this bounce went lower than today's sideways range-bound time. So now that you have a brief understanding of the basic repetitive macro structure that Casper has, let's focus on this first structure of the bull run. So here we are zoomed in on a 2-hour candle. Now, full disclosure, this structure, in my opinion, needs to play out a little more to have a better idea of where we are in that structure. I'm going to throw out 2 different possibilities. So there are 3 parts, as we mentioned, the first wave, the second wave, and the third wave. It's possible that this is playing out on a small scale. Here's your first wave. I would say all this is your first wave. It's now moving up into the second wave. If this is the case, it would consolidate and then eventually move up into the third wave. Now, I'm on a 2-hour candle, and the rest of this chart has been playing out on a much larger time frame. This is on a day candle right now. So it's also possible that this is really just the first wave. So I'm back here on charts.cointrader.pro. And the reason why I'm here is because I can copy this fractal and paste it on today's chart. So here is that bounce. While there are some differences, in the end, I believe there are a lot of similarities. We have this first wave, this first peak, which is all very clear with the past. We have this second peak here, and this is where it really goes different. Although there are some similarities, we see where on today's chart it tried to move up and it couldn't, so it just ended up falling. We see the same kind of concept here where it tries to move up, it can't, and it falls. It eventually comes to a capitulation point, and we are now working on the next part of the structure, the bull run. So here is one possibility. This is this structure, copy and pasted. So this is one possibility. Here's that first wave. This is on a small time frame, and we are now kind of working on this second wave, and we would still need to move up into the third wave. The other possibility is it's playing out on a larger scale, and it would be maybe something similar to this, where this is potentially the first wave or the move up into the first wave, something like this maybe. Not 100% sure. As time goes on, it should become clear what exactly is at play here. If it's playing out on this scale, we potentially have much more to move up before this first structure is complete. Now, actually, believe it or not, this is a little more to the scale of this one here, where you have your first wave, which kind of is in line with this bottoming out part of the structure, which is what this would be. It would kind of be in this area. This little pullback right here is really at the top part of this structure, of this bounce, which is something similar to what this does. Now, this is very much speculation. We don't know how high this will go. And the reason why we don't know that is the timing, height, and depth is going to be unique every single time it plays out. Furthermore, As I've mentioned in previous videos, CSPR is well known for printing small structures and then, bam, printing a massive structure. So to assume that it has to play out at this scale is really assuming quite a bit. But it is a possibility. Now, another thing to keep in mind, it's not going to play out exactly like this. It's going to be original, just as every other structure that has repeated has looked different, although it's been similar to its predecessor. This one's also going to do the same. It's going to be similar. It's going to harken back, just as today's chart harkens back to this bounce. Well, this one will harken back to its previous iterations, but it's going to be original. And we also can't forget the possibility of this third wave declining. In this case, it went to the first wave zone, but we could have a substantial decline and a kind of a flat area like this that plays out again today. So that's another possibility that we need to be aware of. So folks, here we are back at today's chart. We have light at the end of this tunnel with this move up. It's my belief we're really just at the beginning stage of the bull run structure. There's a lot of good days coming. Now, there are going to be pullbacks, and it's important to understand that in a bull run structure, you can have massive pullbacks. For all those of you who have held on through this time, you know, thumbs up to you. You have what it takes to endure the challenges of investing in crypto. Crypto can be a difficult thing to invest in. This repetitive macro structure has been an excellent guide. Now, I have made mistakes of it. When this bounce first started, I thought it was over and we were starting the bull run structure. I had to adjust as the chart basically told me I was wrong and that we're still in the bounce. So even though there has been some curveballs thrown, if you remain humble and open and able to reflect what the chart is telling you, it's really the chart. I'm trying to communicate the story that this chart is telling. And sometimes I screw up that story, but the more I remain flexible and humble in my analysis, the better off I am and the better it is for you. So I'm so glad to finally see the beginnings of this bull run structure. Good days are coming. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. If you did enjoy this video, it'd be much appreciated if you hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not yet a subscriber and you would like to see more of this CSPR analysis, I recommend hitting that subscribe button. I'll continue to follow up on this chart as it continues to develop. Oh, and by the way, I have a series of videos that I deep dive the entire bull run structure. It's on my Patreon under collections. It's a $5 a month subscription. For the month of November, I have a discount code. I'll include it in the description of this video to knock off $2 to bring it down to a $3 month subscription. Connected to that is a Discord where I am much more active than on YouTube or X. So if you want to keep up on my analysis on CSPR or XRP, that is really the place to be because I am much more active there. Anyways, enough of that. I'm so glad you caught this video. I hope you catch my next one. Have a great day, and bye for now.